Howdy freeze dryers. Today we're gonna do some deer loin tacos, and I know it's past deer season, but by this time you've probably, if you shot a deer or you have access to deer, you've probably gotten it back by now from the locker, and you're probably looking for some recipes for something to do with it. It's not the most versatile meat, but it is great for deer loin tacos or deer tacos, and deer is awesome for freeze drying because it's a super lean meat. And I wanna get right into this, so let's make some freeze dried deer loin tacos coming up. Deer is a perfect freeze-dried candidate because it has basically no fat on it. It's extremely lean, so there's very little processing, or maybe even no processing. Today for our tacos, I'm actually gonna cut it into cubes, and that way it's ready to just rehydrate with spices. We're gonna put some spices in with the freeze-dried packaging, and that way all you have to do is add a little water, and you're ready to go for your tacos. So I tend to cut these in pretty small strips or cubes because deer is pretty easy to dry out because it is so lean. Normally when you're cooking meats, the part of the way that it stays tender is just from cooking in its fats. There is basically no fat, and in fact I haven't found really any fat on this loin. The best way to remedy that is to slow cook it. And we're gonna do that in a sous vide. You can also do it in a pressure cooker or a crock pot. And I found if you cut it into small strips like this, which are good for tacos anyway, that it actually stays a lot more tender. So today I'm using just about 1 pound 12 ounces of deer loin, and it's cut into small strips, perfect for tacos. And what I'm gonna do is take some vegetable broth. You could use other things if you want to, but you pretty much want to put enough vegetable broth in here that the deer loin is almost submerged in vegetable broth. And then I'm gonna take just a couple splashes of sriracha. I'm gonna take 1 onion and dice up an onion, as well as 4 cloves of garlic. You're gonna take that garlic and the onion and add it either to a sous vide bag or add it to the bottom of your crock pot. Then you're gonna take a bell pepper, red or green or whatever color you want. 1 bell pepper, otherwise if you're using the smaller ones, I usually use 5 or 6. And we're gonna dice those up as well. And then we're gonna add those to the sous vide bag or the crock pot. Now we're gonna make our taco spice mixture, and we're actually gonna cook it in the spices so it kind of infuses the meat with the taco spice. And for that we're gonna need 1/2 teaspoon of brown sugar, a tablespoon of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of cumin, a teaspoon of paprika, a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder, 1/4 teaspoon of oregano, and then it's optional if you want to add a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes as well. And this mixture is for 1 pound of meat. However, we are cooking it in, so it will be more powerful just being cooked into the meat. And we're gonna freeze dry it and reuse it again. So it depends on how taco-y you want your meat to be. I'm just gonna do enough for 1 pound for my 1 pound 12 ounces because I think it will be plenty. And if you really want an extra taco-y type meat, then I would probably, 1.5 or 2 times this recipe. Mix all these spices together, and then we're gonna add them into our meat with the broth on it. Give that a good mix. And then I'm gonna throw mine in the Avid Armor and marinate it. And this is another reason why I don't want to over spice this, because I think if you do too much spice, it's gonna overpower the meat and just taste too taco-y. And then I'm actually gonna use the new food funnel to fill up my bag. A nice trick, whether you're using Mylar or you're doing what I'm doing right now, throw a bowl under the food funnel. That'll hold your bag in place no matter what kind of bag you have. And then you can use your other hand to kind of hold it and then filter or funnel in. If you're using a sous vide, just make sure you mix up all of your contents. Make sure you seal your bag, and you also want to make sure that your meat is submerged with all of the ingredients in here. You're just going to clip this to the side of this pan, and this is going to go in for 129 degrees for 2 hours. And if you're going into the slow cooker, just add back in your meat and your seasoning mixture. Make sure that there is enough liquid to keep it moist throughout the cook. You're gonna wanna go on low for about 8 hours. If you're doing a higher setting, probably around 5. Make sure you're checking it throughout that time just to make sure. You don't wanna overdo it, you don't wanna underdo it. The slow cooker will take a little bit longer, hence the name slow cooker. All right, these are all done. I'm gonna go right onto a pre-cut parchment lined pan, but first I'm gonna drain off this juice and try and get these into some ice cube trays because we're gonna freeze these so we can use this to rehydrate. And I think I'm just gonna take some tongs. If you've never had venison before, it definitely has a different smell. Definitely has a little bit different taste than beef or something like that would. But if it's seasoned right, I like it better than beef actually. And if you've ever had venison or deer loin in any form, tacos or just steaks or whatever, I will guarantee you that you have never had deer that's this tender coming from a sous vide. It is like melt in your mouth, so tender, delicious, doesn't taste gamey or anything. You add some spices to it. We're gonna put a lid on this. I'm gonna freeze this. I'm gonna give the liquid at least 24 hours so it can freeze all the way through. And we will go to the freeze dryer. See if we can make ourselves some freeze-dried deer loin tacos. So here's our broth cubes. Please take a minute to subscribe if you haven't already to Live Life Simple. We do primarily freeze drying, a little homesteading on this channel. And here is our deer loin tacos. They look delicious and smell delicious. While you're subscribing, make sure you click the bell to get notifications of future videos that come out. Those come out every Sunday at 8 a.m. And if you like what we do here and you found the video helpful, please let us know. And the best way to do that is by giving us a thumbs up. You can find this deer loin taco recipe at thefreezedryingcookbook.com, as well as over 250 other recipes. We add multiple recipes every single week. And we also have a hard copy version of our freeze drying cookbook. It does lag behind because we don't put a new version out until we have enough recipes to fill up the hard copy. So if you want the newest recipes up to date all the time, freezedryingcookbook.com. And to join our freeze drying community, just go to Retired at 40's freeze drying group. That can be found on Facebook or MeWe. You can use the search magnifying glass and find all kinds of topics or questions that you need answers to. We do giveaways in that Facebook group. And if you're considering buying a freeze dryer, please consider using our affiliate link that can be found down in the description. That helps us do those giveaways. It helps us support the Facebook and the MeWe group. It also helps support this YouTube content and helps us develop new products for streamlining the whole freeze drying process. Those can be found at freezedryingsupplies.com. We have a new food funnel. This is very large. It's big enough to fit a large tray and not have any spillage at all. That's huge. There's nothing else on the market like it. We developed it from scratch and it's made in the USA. It looks like the freeze drying is just about complete on the deer loin tacos, so let's check those out. All right, we're all done at 23 hours, 12 minutes. I did actually add a little time to this because I knew it was getting close and I was going to bed, but I'm always amazed at how fast meat does. It just doesn't seem like it would be something that would take such a short time, but it's always in the low 20 hours it seems like. This looks awesome. I'm super stoked for this. I also snuck a couple bites of this meat before I put it in the freeze dryer, or before I put it in the freezer, and this is probably top 3 most tender meat that I've ever had in my life. And I don't know if it's just because of this actual meat itself or because of the sous vide, and maybe just a combination of both, but venison or deer loin or just really deer in general is not something that is known for being tender, but this stuff would just melt it in your mouth. I'm hoping that when we rehydrate it, it's gonna do that same thing. I think from what I've noticed with meat is the stuff that you cook first tends to do better than if you do raw and then try and rehydrate it. And I think the reasoning behind that is it breaks down when you're cooking and makes it more tender. So when you rehydrate it, it's already kind of broken down. If someone watching knows the scientific reasoning behind that, please chime in because I would like to know. But over all the cycles that I have done with meat, that's my take on my experience with meat is pre-cooked always does better than raw. And I didn't do dividers in this because I thought it would probably just be handy to be able to rehydrate the whole thing at one time. But I probably should have. I'm gonna see if I can just push these down and cut these into sections, and then we'll just, I'll get maybe a per section gram weight, and then we can figure out if you just wanted to do a little bit at a time. I was actually able to push them down after the fact through there. The dividers do have kind of a knife edge on them, so they're able to cut through this stuff. I think I'm gonna rehydrate 2 portions of this, and then I'll weigh it. And that way we'll have a formula to rehydrate this. All right, so 2 sections, and the weight is 64 grams. And then I think if we take 3 or 4 of these broth cubes that we cooked with and use those to rehydrate, I'm gonna bag the rest of these up, and then I'll meet you in the freeze drying kitchen. How am I gonna do that? I am glad you asked. We're gonna use the new food funnel. We specifically designed it so it's 18 inches diagonally, so even a large tray, it has plenty of room on both sides. So food funnel, check. Oxygen absorber, check. Vacuum sealed, check. All right, perfect timing because it's lunchtime and I am starving. So I have a tostada shell, and then I also have some white corn tortilla shells. I'm gonna try both of them. This, I am hoping that this is gonna stay as tender as it was before it was freeze dried. This, honest to God, was one of the most tender meats I've ever had in my entire life. So rare, especially with deer. So I'm gonna take some freeze dried tomatoes also from quite a few years ago actually. And I'm gonna throw a few of those in there. And we'll rehydrate those at the same time. My water just got done. And I'm gonna start off with half a cup of water. That seems to always be the magic amount. And this was 64 ounces of deer loin taco mixture. So this is pretty close. I'm gonna throw a little bit more in here. This also does have that cubed juice that we originally marinated with as well inside of this mixture. I think I'm gonna throw about 1/8 of a cup. That's looking a lot better. I'm gonna mix this up. We'll let it sit for about 3 to 5 minutes. That's usually the magic amount of time. Let's check it out, see how it's going. You can see that the meat got very dark, very typical for really any kind of meat that's freeze dried. This is just about the perfect texture. I think it just has a little bit of sauce. If you remember, we also put onions, we put garlic, we put peppers in here, and I did that on purpose because I want this to be ready to rock and roll when you rehydrate it. You can just throw it in some taco shells or just eat it just the way this is. All right, we have our deer loin, we have some peppers, we have onions, garlic, tomatoes, and now we got some cheese to top. As I was doing this, I thought it would probably be a good idea in your mix. You could just freeze dry some cheese and throw that cheese right in there too if you wanted to. Freeze dried cheese always does really well, especially shredded cheese. And there we go, those are ready to eat. All right, there we go. I didn't have enough for my tostada, so I'm just gonna do 3 tacos. Still super, super tender. I can't believe that rehydrated deer is staying this tender, but it's gotta be the sous vide, it's gotta be the way that it breaks down the meat just to make it tender. It keeps it tender. To me, that's just more proof that pre-cooking meat before freeze drying is the better way to do it. If you're not a hunter or you don't have access to deer meat like this, you could always do this with steak or chicken or whatever you wanted to do. This is an awesome recipe. I can't believe this turned out as good as it did. In the meantime, this is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple. Catch you next week. Yum.